but you are seeing. Thank you, Daniel. But you are seeing me today in my capacity of co-chair of the Catalyst 2030 Europe chapter. I am delighted to be your host for what promises to be an exciting 90 minutes spent together. Allow me to share a few words about how we will spend this next 90 minutes together as we give a bit more time for people to join us. I'll get to our topic and our fantastic speakers in a minute, but for some, let's start with some housekeeping. To guarantee the best experience for everyone, please keep your mic on silent at all time. I don't think we give you much a choice on that today. I recommend using the speaker's view that you're going to find on the top right of the screen for the best watching experience. During this event, our valued guests will debate 3 rounds of questions that we prepared for them ahead of time. Between these rounds, we'll share inputs from the rooms in 2 ways. We will invite challengers to ask a question or share a comment. Those challengers will identify ahead of time. And we also address the most popular Slido question to our speakers. So for those of us unfamiliar with Slido, it's a simple tool that we will use to collect questions. You'll be able to add and vote on your favorite questions by clicking on the link that Daniel or Magdalena are going to pop up in the chat right now. Thank you, Daniel. Okay, that sounds good. Can I have some thumbs up? Good. Okay, so in order to avoid taking too much time, I will briefly set the stage for our conversation today. So this event happens in the context of Catalysing Change Week, which is a flagship event of the movement of social entrepreneurs and social innovators, Catalyst 2030. It's the 3rd time out of 3 that the Commission is joining us for an event during this week, and where we convene to exchange perspectives and informations to advance our shared agenda and accelerate action towards the SDGs. And now, more generally, this year is a really important one for the social economy, which will be the sector we are all part of, and which is enjoying quite some momentum lately. The European Commission is leading the way with landmark policies for the sectors and processes aimed at creating a dynamic of transformation within our industrial ecosystems that give a voice to all stakeholders and aim at building a green and equitable Europe. As a chapter, we've been involved and will continue to be in all consultative parts leading up to the Social Economy Action Plan, as well as the transition pathway on the social and proximity economy. And we are truly appreciative of the tangible efforts of the Commission to include all stakeholders at the table. Actually, we are so appreciative of them that I'm glad to share that the teams behind the Social Economy Action Plan and Transition Pathways are finalists of the Catalyst 2030 Award, which is an award through which we acknowledge and celebrate the champions of the sector. So congratulations, represented here by Patrick, and well deserved. With the conversation today, our goal is going to enrich further the Social Economy Action Plan that has been published in last December, and to add an element of reflection to the transition pathway by creating a space to question what is transformative change and what we can do to enable it. It's a strategic conversation if we want to build a green and equitable society and economy in Europe and in the wider world. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce our amazing speakers. I will be brief, as we would need much more time than what we have today to do them justice, but I invite you to look them up at their work for more. That's me, social entrepreneur, that's all you need to know. Next, first, we are joined by Dr. François Bonnici. François is the director of the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship, head of social innovation at the World Economic Forum, and a co-author of a book that I highly recommend you to pick up, The System Work of Social Change. Welcome, François, and thank you so much for being here with us today. We are also joined by Peter Cafferkey, who is representative and who is involved in a very exciting project on transformative finance. For those who do not know, EVPA is the European Venture Philanthropy Associations. Good morning, Peter, and thanks for joining us from Hamburg. We are also joined by Georgia Efremova, who is a policy officer for financial instruments in social impact investments at the Directorate-General for Economic and Financial Affairs at the European Commission. Good morning, Georgia. Thanks for joining us. We start the Commission and now welcome Patrick Klein. Patrick is head of the sector of social economy and social enterprise at the DG GROW, the DG for internal market, industry, entrepreneurship, and SMEs. Bienvenue, Patrick. And finally, allow me to welcome Olin Muhlenbein, who is partner at Ashoka Germany and co-lead of the system unit at Ashoka Globalizer. If you do not know Ashoka, it's a really important network in the social entrepreneurship space. So welcome again to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us today. All right, if you're all ready, with no further ado, let's jump to the fun part of the event with the first question that I will address to all of our speakers. So you see, we're going for big conversations today. So as COVID-19 has exposed the failures of our systems and existential crises are no longer confined to books, system change has become a new buzzword that evokes different emotions and meanings for various stakeholders. However, there is no denying that we must transform our systems to reach our 2030 and 2050 shared objectives. In your view, what do the work behind transformative change and systems level innovation looks like? What would you say are key principles behind actions that enable catalytic social and environmental change? And what do you think such work is critical to addressing our existential crisis and building a green and equitable future for all Europeans and all people everywhere? With that big question, I'm going to turn to you, Patrick, first, who has the task to open the vote today. Thank you so
much. Which is a difficult task. Thank you very much, Valeria, for this invitation to participate to this workshops. And indeed, to beginning with, I would say that Europe and I mean the world has experienced, really profound changes, over the last decades. We have seen, a lot on globalization, on innovation, new technologies that have transformed, the way we live. There are still many challenges, in front of us. And maybe, the one that I want to focus on this morning is really, about, climate change. We have new and innovative approach that needs to meet, the economic, social, and environmental challenge now and into the future. And I think that one of the reply to your question, is that is one word is co-creation. We need to co-create, our policies. This is very important, and this concept, of co-creation, when all participants are able to make contribution to achieve a specific goal, is really of key importance. I mentioned before climate change. We have seen that, we have all read that, climate change, have not, one single cause, and we see many interdependencies, So what we need to do, we should stop working, really across the silos with national or regional boundaries. We all need to work together. This requires really, a global action, and this cannot be driven by a single institution, but we need to be reliant, on numerous people, organizations, stakeholders. This is really, the core topic of, of this systemic approach. And you were mentioning, before the social economy action plan. This is exactly, what we have done. We have worked with stakeholders. We have decided, to co-build together an action plan with a strategy that is impactful. We are currently working on the same way, I would say, through a transition pathway for the actors of the social economy, so that they can be greener, they can use digitalization to achieve their goals, and we want them to help other sectors of the economy to be even greener and more digitalized. And in order to achieve this goal, we are co-creating this transition pathway with different actors, and this is key. We cannot achieve results on our own. It's important to work together, as I mentioned, across boundaries. And working, I would say, on systemic change, innovation this is not easy, but this is very critical. It can take times, and it really needs, a mindset shift. So I think that really it's an important work, and we see, all the different challenges that are in front of us. They are numerous. Let's join forces, to have, impactful action, to achieve success.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you so much for your commitment and the inspiring call to join action together. George, I'm going to turn to you. Would you like to share your opinion on the matter?
Yes. Thank you very much. So I would kind of endorse everything that Patrick said. Deeply resonates with me. Of course, I work also in the European Commission, but from the financial instrument side. So mine is a bit different, complementary perspective, I guess. I work on the social finance tools, mainly repayable finance, but everything that we have launched in support for social enterprises, microfinance, in the impact investing space, sort of broadening that paradigm to create equity products, social outcomes contracting tools that are, our first cross-sectoral collaboration tools. So I would say turning into this systemic perspective already years ago. And more recently, my work is on piloting direct experimentation and testing on the ground to support social innovation and scale it, bring it across borders. This is what we are doing in the Commission, sort of under the adage of using the power of finance to unlock system change. And just to say, all of these initiatives and also the way we work with philanthropy now to broaden from small pilots to more horizontal and systemic level, all of this is spelled into the new social economy action plan of the Commission. But for the purposes of this, because it's a discussion, it's not just saying the great things we're doing. There are many questions that we are facing actively. And I would even interrogate this, what I told you, using the power of finance to unlock systemic change. What actually unlocks the change? I mean, finance is not the thing. Finance is just, for us, at the end, a convening tool, because money talks every time. You put money on the table, it's good to bring people together. EU talks, so we have an institutional leverage, but that's not enough. So we have the power to bring a lot of people around the table. And we have been saying, yes, we need everyone's attentions, everyone's participation. And we had to also get to the point to say, okay, too many people, it's also sometimes can diverge. So who do we need in the room to get things done? So, good collaboration and partnership is not when you cannot add any more else, like you're not missing anyone, but that you cannot take anyone from the room, like the thing will fall apart if someone is taken, because these are really key people. I guess, and I said convening and influencing. These are the two things that I do. I think inside the institution and outside in the world of socioeconomic development, social finance, in order to promote those initiatives and, well, achieve good outcomes. I said how we convene. The convincing is very important. A lot of convincing is done through regulation, or it's by mandate, a bit by coercion, or by, well, fear to do something. So how do you actually inspire and show? Because you can inspire people, or you can demonstrate, test and demonstrate something. And this is what we're trying to do, demonstrate. And I would say the definition of success for me, I've recently adopted that, is when something is so good, I have created a thing that everyone wants to claim. That's when I know I have success. And a lot of times, because we're inside a very political institutions, we're saying, is it this hijacking? Someone is like taking it or claiming it. No. That's when we know we're on the right track. Everyone said it was their idea. They want to do it. So this is what I can say. And then I have more principles. I don't know how much time I have, but the engagement with philanthropy, which we have now to systematically pool EU and philanthropic resources, be they through financial instruments or now through grants, that's yielding a lot of learning to us. What I'm understanding is that to engage, you cannot just ask people to help you build a better world. So as a friend says it, it's sometimes easier to sell, it's easier to sell a headache pill than vitamins. Like, it's easier to ask people to solve a problem than to just improve their practice a little bit, because the world will be better. So they want a solution for their problem, for where are my pressure points, where is my headache. And so for this requires from the institutions a real approach to understanding the needs, not just here's what we want to do, please join us, but really going there and serving their world, the world they live in, what is their day-to-day challenge, and then tell them that they will improve the world as well. But so yeah.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you so much. That was really, really rich. I like how you're questioning what is it that you are doing to be able to do things better, and understanding also the limits of what you might be doing and the need to find ways to engage people in those processes to build that better world. Odin, I'm going to turn to you right now, tasked with answering that big question. So can you please share your perspective? Thank you.
Thanks so much. And yeah, I think we need to narrow things down just a little bit. So, I mean, of course, there are several ways to achieve systemic changes. I can only talk or this whole event is more from the perspective of social innovation and social entrepreneurship. So let's focus on that, but also at the same time appreciate that we are by no means the only field that pushes for those changes. Like, shout out to activists and government innovators and artists and, you know, the other folks. So in terms of social innovation, just a simplified way to think about it is to just have these 3 stages, right? So you have new ideas for how you could do things. These could be social norms or social practices or new types of interactions or a new role in system, stuff like that. Right? Then somebody has these ideas and does some testing. Maybe first in one classroom only, or in one village, or whatever it might be, and then probably testing some more just to make sure that if it works, it wasn't a fluke. And then comes the critical part of institutionalization. So this is the step where if a new idea really works and produces the results that we want, how do we get it? So to benefit everybody, like on a national level, say, or in Europe. And here, like, what we want to have is like a new market or a new field of practice, like microfinance or psychosocial therapy, or, you know, stuff like that. Or we want a new practice to be widely adopted, like a new teaching method, or I don't know, using packages for educational messages, or all of these kinds of ideas. And or we want to have a new policy or a new industry standard. But so there are different ways to do this. But ultimately, we need some sort of trick to get from like delivering a new idea by 1 or 2 organizations at a few places to really like affect everyone, like, or a whole field. And then, so what do we need for that? Quite a lot, but since we have the European Commission here, I just focus on that, and we try to do our homework within the field of social entrepreneurship internally more. So 3 things would be really great. We need strong ecosystems for social innovation, and of course the government and the European level can do a lot to promote those. We need, especially for the step of institutionalization, we need better funding. I don't think we have a funding problem for the first stages, like the new idea stage and the testing stages. A lot of stuff can be done. There are a lot of sandboxes and ways for social ventures to experiment. But the problem starts when you want to work on the policies or create the big networks to push for broader change. Then all of a sudden, nobody wants to fund these things for various reasons. Maybe we can talk about that later in this event. And ultimately, it would be great to have like clear responsibilities and processes in government to institutionalize innovations, like to quickly recognize them, prioritize them, turn them into policies, industry standards, whatever is needed, right? Maybe even new administrative processes, new government, like ministry behaviors, different types of interactions between ministries and civil society organizations, doesn't matter, but like some structured way so that all the proven social innovations that the field of social entrepreneurship produces are not just, you know, like right now, they are all standing at the ready. Like there are so many proven things that could be institutionalized, but are not picked up at the right speed by government entities. And that could, we believe, be changed fairly quickly. And then just one last point, my worry is that even if we do all of that, the changes might only happen at the margin or be fairly superficial. And what we need for deeper change is the right incentives to change our whole economic model. And this is my big plea to the European Commission in particular, like that it must not be lucrative to harm the environment, and there must be way more redistribution of wealth. Unless we have those things, and these really can only be political changes. Like this is not a matter of social innovation. We know that this is necessary, but without these kinds of frames, we can produce all kinds of fancy social innovations, but ultimately, like this will not save us because we will only, you know, improve things at the margin.
Thank you so much, Nadine, for those very concrete recommendations, and yeah, many things I think many people around the room agree with. Speaking of which, as we speak of finance, I'm going to turn to Peter, who I believe might have a few elements that he wants to contribute on the topic.
Well, actually, first, I just want to thank you for the invite to the panel. It's slightly daunting to follow on from speakers such as Odin, who's fairly clearly pointed out some of the home truths that need to be known, but also I'm going to be brief because I want to hear what is coming up in the next sort of round of questions as well. So I thought about this question. I thought about the big, wide, open question that you posed, which was quite a fun exercise. And one thing got me. You asked me what the work actually looks like. What does systems change look like? And I think we can't run away from the fact that actually it looks quite dull. It looks quite granular. It looks on a day-to-day basis, someone who's doing the most systematic change over a year, if you turn up on a Monday and go back on a Tuesday, I mean, it might not look that exciting. And I think there's something here about that kind of calling to that idea that in order for these things to succeed, it feeds into the one point I'd put into the mix that was also mentioned by Patrick, and that's co-ownership, co-creation, and having everyone involved in the program. So there's a shared future vision. We all know what we're working towards, and the programs or the changes aren't being done to people, but with people. It's a cliche, but it's one we don't seem to be learning. And I think there's something here for me very much as we look at the future of this, is that also we're not going to do one of those horrible things where you go around the table and everyone has to speak. You don't have to speak, but you have to feel like you will be heard if you want to speak. And not just at the start of programs, but all the way through programs. So all the way through, we're solving our problems. It's not systems change, it's not the system, it's our system. And if we do anything, we affect the system. It's not you suddenly step into a bubble and become a systems changer. So that would be my kind of point. I've got more details on finance, but I'll hand over to a far greater expert for this round.
Thanks so much, Peter. Thanks so much for contributing really important points. Also about the feeling of knowing that you're continuously being heard and are only able to speak when you're called to the table at the very moment. Now going to turn to François Bonnici, who might have many perspectives to contribute to what you have already shared.
Thanks, Valeria, and thanks to everyone. Really a pleasure to be here and share this panel with you. And importantly, you as well, Valeria, representing that practitioners as well, and many of those in the audience, Sue and others that hopefully will challenge the discussion here. Without repeating everyone, I think there's an important, somewhat philosophical question to ask ourselves in building the social economy and talking about kind of more systemic change. In one way, we're trapped in a capitalist system and we're using the tools of capitalism to argue for a social economy. And the more we do that, because it's the practical way to make progress in the short term. And if you speak to activists in the world about what system change is about, it's about power, right? And so I really appreciated actually Odin's comments, Patrick's and Georgia's and Peter's as well, because I think they're, while saying this is the work we're doing and we all need to be doing, we need to be building the policies, we need to be building the financial tools, we need to be finding those ways of social entrepreneurs to engage with the existing system. We often as social entrepreneurs, if you go and speak to activists who've been doing the work of activism around change for decades, there is a perspective there that social entrepreneurship is the co-optation, is the capitalist co-optation of the social agenda, right? And so at the same time as us thinking about needing to make that progress inside the existing system, there's a risk, right? That somehow we reduce the work of systemic change to tools and outcomes. And that is the way the world works. It works through finance, it works through performance and measures and return. And yet so much of the change actually that so many organizations that working at the in communities and at the grassroots also need to see is the process of change, right? Is about how things change in their lives and what kind of role they play in that. And that's clearly what the work of social innovators do. But so I think there's a call here both for, I'm not going to add to what I actually agree with everyone said in terms of some of the recommendations of what we need to build, but there is an awareness, right? And as we side and work closer with governments and work closer with business, we also need to retain our links, I think, with social change movements and activists to ensure that, to get some of the changes that Odin was talking about actually requires political change. Where's that going to come from? That's only going to come from pressure from citizens, right? And so somehow ensuring that we have, sorry for the background noise, that we have those, we retain those values. I'm sorry, I'm going to put myself on. There's the train passing by. That it's somehow critical for us to retain those links. And I think that's, part of what the Catalyst movement is building collective voice and collective power. So it's critical that we do that. It's critical that we continue to raise the awareness and, and all of us, I think, here working in our different institutions are trying to use the tools that we have in our institutions to build awareness, to build the tools, to build the ecosystem. But at the same time, not forgetting that in order for some of those changes to actually happen, we need that pressure as well. Right. So I didn't mean to have my notes speaking about activism, but I guess that's an important piece of adding to what we have. And I think many of the work of social entrepreneurs, and I actually see social entrepreneurs being actually on the spectrum of activism. It's a demonstrative form of activism, but it cannot be alone. I think that's the point. The only other, I think, point I would make is part of that role of building understanding and building an ecosystem is not to build it in isolation, right? So we try to, I guess, for decades, bring an identity to social entrepreneurship, social innovation. Now we're trying to bring an identity and visibility to the social economy and social finance, but recognize that that's only going to work if that also it becomes really, part of the mainstream. And so the economy we have today, hopefully we get to call the old economy at some point. And so the work I think that many of us are doing does need to be cross-sector and horizontal. And I think that's part of the social economy action plan, is also thinking about that, so that when, as Odin was saying, we need, we're not going to be going always to the social economy policy for actual policy change. We need to be doing that in every sector. So it's that broadening of the recognition. I'll pause there because there's a good discussion to come.
Thank you so much, François. We can see themes emerging here, that of horizontality, working together, involving all layers of society and not creating new silos while we try to break silos. I'm going to open the conversation now by bringing in Sue Riddleston, who is a practitioner, like François was mentioning. She's the founder and CEO of Bioregional. And so, Sue, welcome to the floor, and it's yours to share comments or questions.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
I'm a member of Catalyst 2030. I'm chair of the UN and Government's Advocacy Group. And I really welcome the EU Social Economy Plan. And I agree with all of the speakers. You all are doing great things. And I just agreed with every word you said. And especially if Odin hadn't said it, I would, about changing the economic frame. On the climate and environment and economic inequality, we have no time. We've got no time. This is really urgent. We're facing climate breakdown, and we're seeing a rise of populism, which is so scary, and it's fostered and nurtured in part by this economic inequality. So we've got to address this urgently. And I think my key challenge for you all, which wasn't really talked about, is around, so much the EU is so influential on a world stage and with the national actors within Europe. I think the key thing is, how do we get this action at a national level? How will the EU Social Economy Action Plan foster and influence strong and urgent action and implementation and the social economy at a national level?
Thank you very much, Sue. Thank you for that. To this, I'm going to add the question that has been most voted in our Slido, that I think is on the same line. It asks, how can the lessons learned in Europe be shared, spread through the world? Is there an EU mechanism in place for this? Can this go via the delegations abroad? So I'm going to turn to you all to offer you the opportunity to share some feedback, maybe in particular Patrick and Georgia, because we're really speaking of the EU institution here.
Georgia, do you want to begin? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Georgia. No, I think these are good questions indeed. But coming back to the Social Economy Action Plan first, I would say that this communication, this strategy has been built together with different stakeholders, and the ownership should not only be, the European Commission. The ownership should belong to all of us as well. So at the European Commission, we can act, but we cannot act without, member states, national authorities, regional or local authorities. And I will only give you, one example. What we have done, especially, in the European Union, those last years, and something that we will try to continue. We have seen so many great experimentation, in regions, in localities, in Europe, and we clearly think that it's a pity that we cannot exchange them, work with different stakeholders, to create links, to create networks. This is the reason why we have set up several years ago a scheme, the European Social Economy Region schemes, where we co-finance, where the Commission co-finance actions that are taken, at a regional and local level to exchange best practices, success story, and to build on experimentation, that are successful. This is something that we have done, especially, for social finance, to develop social entrepreneurship education. We have worked on the development of social and ecological clusters. These are all the experimentation, that we need to share. We need to reinforce. So we can do things, but we can not do things alone. Again, this is, the key word that I use, for the first question. Let's continue to co-create together solutions that are impactful. And maybe for the international level, in few words, the Social Economy Action Plan clearly mentioned that, I mean, we should work, with different region, of the world to develop, social economy, social innovation, social entrepreneurship. We are working, with international organization, international association. There are so many, but it's important, that we build strengths with them, in order to be impactful. Last week there was, a big conference, in Strasbourg, the Social Economy conference, where we could have met, different international organizations. And what I feel, having worked, on social economy for a different year, is that there is this big momentum. There is this big momentum of change. Let's continue. It's far from being easy, but the momentum is there. Let's continue. Thank you, Valeria.
Let's continue. Yeah, the momentum is there, is palpable. I think since the Mannheim and the event that we had last week, you can really feel that energy and everybody coming together in the spirit of collaboration, which is truly amazing. Georgia, is there anything you'd like to add, or would you rather move to the second question?
I can add very quickly. I'm glad I'm coming after Patrick because I'm less celebratory in a way. I will be frank, the official answer, me working from the financial instrument side, the official answer is that we're doing everything that we can, and we are, to build the social finance markets, the investment ecosystems, balance them to the extent possible geographically, so not just Western Europe, but Eastern Europe, create new financial intermediaries in the social space, all the right tools for them to answer their risk liquidity needs of financial intermediaries. I mean, create diversification, and hopefully that will yield diverse funding tools and forms of capital for social enterprise on the ground, etc., etc. We are doing all this, but it's much more difficult than that. And a few years ago, like from the local level, to scale something or to put the blocks together at the national level, it's very hard. And a few years ago, we started saying, okay, let's see if we can do this right. Let's do direct, let's pick a few countries, run a few pilots, scale them, bring the social innovation experience across border, and then help this scale nationally in the national ecosystems. Guess what? It's really, really hard. Even when you have a proven social innovation, we're taking it from the rural to the urban context, across the border, create new partnerships and everything. And now they say this is like housing, access to housing for vulnerable groups, Roma families, the hardest social challenge in Europe, according to me. So how do you give them housing? We have good model, we have financial intermediaries with local authorities and social organizations working together, right? It's all the good things, all the recipes. Now, how to go from 100 houses to 10,000? For Slovakia, for example, this can happen. This could be the market. But for this, you need national commitment and the national funding tools. Now, from the EU perspective, it's there. All the funding tools are there. And the framework, strategic plans are there. It's not very easy to convince. And this is quickly becoming a study on the disconnects of the funding tools on the national level. So I'm just saying it's really hard, even though we have the best intention on the high level. And communications is a big part, I think, of unlocking the national processes. And I think this is something that we can do very effectively from the EU. And communication, not just about the results and the successes of our projects, about shifting the narrative lenses. In our case, we're working with vulnerable people. So we have to kind of shift stereotypes and attitudes towards Roma, but by appealing to moral sentiments and the emotions of people. We need a totally different communication style about seeing poverty as an experience and what the experience of poverty can do to any of us. It's not us and them. So all of this, I mean, this is a big part of doing the work, and just to say it's a missing part, but I think it's where the EU with other institutional partners, we can advance this. And this mindset shift, I guess, can unlock then the funding to flow and the politicians to have the political cover to act in the right way, because otherwise it's there, but it's not moving.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing this.
I can confirm what Georgia said.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring in that point on the fact that there's a need for some structural changes, structural infrastructures, but also profound need of a mindset and narrative change, which is two things that need to go together and are incredibly difficult. And I think that all of us in the room are aware that you do not have magic and you can't change things like that. So really grateful that you come in that space ready to share your challenges, and you know that we are here, like all the actors that you find in the room, to help wherever we might be useful. I saw, Peter, that you raised your hand before. Would you like to share something?
I'll be very quick, I promise, because I know otherwise we'll get distracted. But it was just very quickly from EVPA's point of view. Well, it's to congratulate the Commissioner a little bit, which is, always seems a bit obsequious when you're on a panel with people. But we've worked over the last sort of 10, 15 years to try and build markets in social finance, and with the support of the Commission, long-term partner. And we are currently doing this in Eastern Europe as well through a Collaborate for Impact program. So we are trying to spread this more widely. So that and our sister networks around the world do operate as networks to share information and educate. However, to François' earlier point as well, it's still a closed shop kind of thing in a way. So the tools are there, but the education piece is there. And actually it needs to be more two-way. So if people aren't using the tools, it's not a case of educating them again, but actually listening to why they're not necessarily fitting into the places we're trying to bring it out. And my second point, because I just picked up on it from your question from Slido, is yes, we should be sharing stuff with Africa and Asia, but also let's not forget that Africa's, I heard it described as the impact sandbox the other day. There's more interest and innovation and things happening in Africa. So a two-way kind of spreading of information, because Europe could really do with some innovation that's coming from other parts of the world as well. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Peter. Yeah, the importance of sharing information. And also, I really appreciate the saying that there is value also from what comes from the thoughts, because this is not typically what we see reflected in our system. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Allow me to move to the second question, because we are behind. So I'll ask you to be brief, please, and we might not do our third question or mix them together. But this is really building on what we've been talking about till now. As we're saying, it's increasingly recognized that multi-stakeholder collaborations, co-creation are central to really transforming our systems. I'm interested in understanding from your perspective, how can these collective approaches make really a decisive contribution to transforming the systems? And what do you think effective collective action looks like? And you can feel free to be really daring with your answer. How can we better support the actors that focus on enabling this collective and relational work? And what do you believe should be the priority areas for action in Europe to enable stakeholders to transform ecosystems together? So I'm going to go back to you, Patrick, to invite you to share your perspective on that question.
Okay, thank you, Valeria. For this, talking about collective action, my personal feeling that to achieve good collective action, this should be based maybe on several points. The first one should be to have a common agenda. The common agenda is very important. We should have a shared vision for change that includes really a common understanding of the problem and a joint approach on how to solve this problem. Maybe the second key element should be how are we going to measure the success, because it's good to have action, but how to measure them. So it's important to collect data, to measure results, with a dedicated set of indicators. We are talking about collective action, which means, a lot of people around the table. And again, people need to work together, but this does not mean that everybody should do the same. everybody should bring, its own stone, I would say, to the process, and focus, on activities maybe on which, he or she, could excel. And again, maybe the last point, and this is something that has been discussed before, it's communicating. It's important, to communicating within, the group that has, this collective action, and with external, stakeholders, to have a kind of maybe spillover effect. So now talking about, the EU, I think that, collective action, we support, this collective action. We talk a lot about, experimentation. I mentioned before, these schemes, these European Social Economy Region schemes. So it's important, to focus on experimentation, on exchange of best practice, and taking into consideration, of course, that this has, some limits. The second element is, of course, developing enabling action. It's important, to develop enabling, conditions, for this collective action, to be successful. We mentioned, founding, regulation, legislation. All of this, is important, and again, the ownership, should not only be, at EU level, but should be spread at a different level of governments. And maybe the third thing, that for me, is important, for this collective action, to be successful, is to build, capacity between, the different members. This can be done through technical assistance. This is something that we are doing, at EU level, and growing networks. We need to support, social innovation networks where collective approach, play a role. This is, something that we are doing. We are trying to do. It's difficult. As Georgia mentioned, it's difficult, but it's really important, to do this, to have, some positive results. That's really, in a nutshell, about this collective, action that we have, to prepare, and indeed, working together, is key. Not easy, but it's important, to implement.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I'm going to turn to François and offer you the floor. François, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah, maybe just to kind of emphasize a little bit that we're in a moment now. I think that Patrick was talking about, despite the reality check that Germany is giving us, there is momentum, right? And part of that momentum is being built by multiple networks, right? And so there is this snowball effect that is happening, which I think is critical. And this is, I think, part of what we need for that tipping point to come, and that we need these collective approaches, and we need the interlinkages between them. And now we're starting to have around the world. I mean, if you look back at this field, the last 20, 30, 40 years, for most of it, we've had either social entrepreneurs themselves saying, this is who we are, this is what we need, or we've had, a number of networks or foundations saying, look at these people. So the narrative's starting to change when governments and multilaterals and organizations like the OECD and the European Commission saying, this is a substantive sector, and can solve these headache problems we have, as Georgia had put it. But when we're starting to have, these other advocates in business now as well saying, this is an important sector, it's something for us to learn from. And look, we're still in early days, we know, and in many countries, there's no recognition at all. So, we're talking about Europe today. And even within Europe, there's obviously a great variation. But it is about recognizing where we are on that momentum point, and recognizing that it is because of networks like these and other networks that we've built that we do have the momentum and growing visibility. So there's something about recognizing that the power of that collective approach is actually building momentum. So I do think we need to because sometimes I think we're all part of these many networks and part of things, and sometimes see the same people, sometimes they're interconnecting, but recognizing that is part of this greater momentum. And so we need to keep at it, even if it feels like in the short term, perhaps there aren't always the tangible outcomes, right? That there are new actors entering into these networks from a different angle, either because of the headache or because of the need for some vitamins. So I do think we need to be patient a little bit in building those and recognizing that we may not see the concrete action always coming out of the collective approaches, and there's sometimes better concrete action coming out of bilateral approaches, and that's kind of what we need as well. But recognizing that longer term work towards more systemic transformation is, the mindset change, the narrative change that is happening by building the collective. So I do think we have to almost be patient with our frustrations, because I think we all probably have it as well when we're in those large networks and alliances, and recognize part of that is actually shifting some institutional. I mean, I'm like, the work we do here at the World Economic Forum, we've looked at social entrepreneurship for a very long time, but by getting governments and business to start talking about it, we're starting to shift our own institutional understanding and position and importance of that. Trying to remember your other question, but maybe
thanks so much, François.
So I'll stop.
We're behind already. I mean, those are purposely big questions, so we could speak a long time on all of them. Very much appreciate what you're saying. Starting on to move fast and also questioning the roles that we're taking, really important points and you are bringing up. Georgia, I'm turning to you again. Could you try to maybe briefly react to what you have heard so far?
Yes, I will react, I think, from the perspective again of my work and maybe the philanthropy file, which we're trying to engage philanthropy actors, foundations more specifically, precisely because they have this important role of ecosystem builders in their own national economy. So echoing what Odin was saying, but also because they have huge pools of capital that need to be redirected towards greater sustainability. And some of you spoke about the political pressure that's needed. Foundations are under a lot of pressure, reputationally, so for legitimacy issues, and also their conscience of having this split between programmatic and endowment side of resources. So anyhow, through the InvestEU program, one of the things we're trying to do is basically engage with this philanthropic capital in a more systematic way, and de-risk it or co-invest towards social mission areas for Europe. And I think in thinking, what are we going to do through this co-investment facility? Would it be just an incremental change, like we do something, or can it be truly transformative? Really, what is the potential to change the system? Are we looking at big instruments? How much of this capital do we have to engage? So if it's 500 billion to engage 300 billion, is it about big numbers or is it about replication? So actually having smaller instruments, but build them so that they can be established multiple times in different collaborations, because you don't solve hunger also through one solution. You need multiple solutions. So I think for us, what this effective collective action will be in terms of bringing this philanthropy organization into our galaxy of impact investing and anchoring the collaboration in specific tools. For the co-investment facility, I think we will be successful and effective if we manage to do something that is simple, standardized, and transparent. So rather than having something that is very complex and very great, but actually not changing the system, something that is good enough, but can be done many times over. That is using a label or creating a label, but something that can be replicated in the financial system, and that it's transparent enough, so easy to use, I think. And because we're going beyond repayable finance into co-funding or funding tools, like co-granting together EU and philanthropy, the philanthropy sector, I think this will be a longer road, but I think that the effective collection action and success there, if we are able to push through and establish an EU level EU-level fund for funding system change work. So Odin knows we have started this work bravely, slowly. It's very hard. It turns out there are many barriers institutionally inside. So it will be a long.
Georgia, you are lagging with simple, standardized, and
yeah. Okay.
You were lagging briefly, but I was appreciating what you were sharing, especially the three keywords: simple, standardized, and transparent. As we are speaking of finance, I'm going to turn to Peter, who might have things to add to what Georgia said and more broadly about effective collective action.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I mean, I was actually staring into space, thinking about what François had just said about networks and how we'd be kind of moving forwards, but sometimes forget that we're all moving forwards in our own networks and pull together. And also from a position of being within a network. So EVPA is in a fortunate position, if we forget sometimes, but it is a fortunate position to be a network of capital deployers. So there is a moment there where you sit with a network and you see the pros and cons of networks as well. So how do we get more collective action? On one hand, we should be calling out those that are not being collective and stop kind of idolizing the people who have done amazing things on their own, but actually start to go, well, why haven't you kind of engaged a bit more? And certainly within networks, that's difficult because there is a slightly vested self-interest. You start to talk to each other in the same language, you start to agree with each other, you don't want to call out each other, but there is a role here for networks, not being negative, but on the kind of flip side to also play a role to say, we're not going to let people get away with it anymore. And actually, if you're not part of the collective, we don't quite shun you, but we talk to you and bring you in, but we are going to call that out as well. So, and one thing I'd say on collective action, I mean, on a very simple note, it's a ridiculous idea that all these complex multi-layered problems are going to be solved by two guys, normally from Stanford or somewhere, going into a darkened room and coming up with an idea. I mean, these are complex collective problems, so the solutions are going to be complex and collective. But I do think it's quite difficult sometimes to actually make that work. And there's a role here for probably everyone on this call to act as the kind of house that enables those collective solutions to take place and enables that everyone's given the same voice in those collective solutions as well. I mentioned we're lucky to have around 300 capital deployers in Europe. People will always listen to our members because they're hoping to get resources and they're hoping to get finance. I mean, they will always get the chance to talk, and that's great, and we love them, and I'm not criticizing that. But a role for us is to then actually try and build spaces where others can come in and share as well. And so very briefly, and this is not a sales pitch, but on the work we've just started on our Transformative Finance Lab, the idea was to see if there was a space where we could enable people to co-create, co-sense. And the answer is it is tough, and the research so far has shown us people have tried and there are solutions. But it's then a point of being able to be the biggest person in the room and say, well, I'm going to get rid of my ego, so will you. Now, EVPA can't really do that, to be honest. I mean, we're not that big. We're 30 people in Brussels. The EU, on the other hand, is bigger than most people and can help to take the ego out of the room. The World Economic Forum, similar kind of status and such like that. So when we talk about collective action, there's a real thing here about the role we can play to help remove some of the egos in the room or call them out as well, which I think is a really important role that we can all play around this table. And I realize when I say that we're the smallest organization around the table, so everyone else can as well. that's where I'd kind of point. And then the last point, very quickly, on specific tools and such, there has been some great work done from the EU, from national level, on sort of social value procurements and such like that. There's tools there where you can put in actual cast iron. We will not work with you unless you have engaged with the community, unless you have a collective element or you have thought about it. So there are practical tools that governments and others can use and have started to use. We just need to share them about a bit more. And I'll stop there because I'm just about on time.
Amazing, Peter. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn to Odin, and maybe when we go in the conversation later, you can also react to each other's comments. So Odin, floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. So I mean, this seems to have a practical and a fundamental level, maybe. On a practical level, the good news is that we have 80-page reports that basically summarize what governments can do to make these stakeholder collaborations easier. It goes into technicalities on how to build capabilities, which ones exactly, which entities in government and in the social now need what, changing like the funding mechanisms in philanthropy and government. Georgia, we are already like working on that. But to some extent, that is the boring part. And so on a fundamental level, I would maybe even challenge the whole question. So like, because it's like, you know, how can we do this? And I think we should at this point worry less about the how. So there's this great quote by Saint-Exupéry. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the people to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. So this is the idea that, like, just give them a good goal and stuff will happen. Like, don't worry too much, right? And the equivalent in this case would be, like, just make it worthwhile to everyone to produce better results for society. And that's just, you know, coming back to my point from earlier, but like, and at the same time, make it scary not to do it. And if you have those two things, like a good stick and a good carrot, you can, like, we don't even have to have these discussions about the how-tos. People will figure it out, you know? And that would be my ask to, like, to especially the people with political power, do whatever you can to move in that direction. Like, all the how-tos, all the new instruments, all the collaboration, it's all great, but, like, you know, this is almost like a secondary effort. Just make people yearn for the vast and endless sea.
I love the mix of poetry and very concrete and on the spot comments out in, like, the stick and the carrot. We really need the stick and the carrot. But I know actually that we're going to reopen this conversation to the room. That Arthur, who is going to join us, is likely to have a few words to share with us about that. So I'll call to the floor Catherine Milligan, who is director of the Collective Change Lab, and Arthur Wood, who is founder of Equity for Humanity, and who was part of the former leadership group member of Ashoka, who launched Social Finance Service. So maybe, Catherine, we can start with you, invite you to share a comment or question that you have for us, because floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's not so much a challenge. I thought what I might do actually is just inject a practitioner perspective, sort of building on François' comments, and to some degree Peter's. And, you know, I mean, Odin, what I hear you saying is, you know, the process is the solution in a way, which is what we're advocating for. But, you know, he's a well-known system entrepreneur, and, you know, essentially this is what many of us, I think, would know his work. But what he shared with us, saying essentially, you know, he's been working to shift a system for about 3 years, had some big early wins, had all the right ingredients, a credible leadership team, a broader network of doers and donors who were bought in, you know, inclusive process to, you know, create the objectives and the roadmap. But 3 years in, he was sharing with us, honestly, you know, we're stuck. And we are chipping away at making modest incremental gains, but none of it really amounts to that much. And, you know, in sharing that frustration, sort of, you know, openly said, we need to radically rethink how we work together as a collective. Otherwise, I don't think that system transformation is possible. So I've been thinking about that a lot lately, that notion of stuckedness. And I'm convinced this is not an isolated experience. And what my colleagues and I at CCL are trying to say is that to get to more radical system outcomes, we need more radical ways of collaborating, of being together in collective. And that is both very simple and is very hard. And, you know, our sense and our take on this is, you know, that means you've got to go beyond transactional business relationships to establish profound trust and connection. You have to embrace an emergent process, because there's not a solution. You can't just formulate the strategy straight away and define all the KPIs up front that you're going to hit, you know, 3 years hence. You need to understand and acknowledge the history of what's come before. And, you know, to François' point, you've got to look at power, at voice, at agency, at narrative. And I'm sure so many of you on this call have got lots of other ideas about what more radical ways of working together in collaboratives looks like. But I guess the question or the thought I would just leave us with is, in a world that, I mean, we're all so busy, we have to deliver so fast, we feel accountability, we need results today. Working in those ways is so challenging to do. So, how do we create the space to radically rethink how we work together as collectives? I don't know that there's an answer, but that's the question that we're wrestling with. And I know there's a lot of appetite from many other social sector leaders out there who are struggling with that same question as well. So I just wanted to offer that here.
Thank you very much. So let me think. Does any one of you want to quickly react to what Catherine said, and then we ask Arthur to share his comments and we can have a broader discussion? Go ahead, François.
Yeah, to emphasize the point also, because Catherine and I, are both interested in how these collective approaches emerge. It comes back to my point of, are we replicating the capitalist model in building social enterprises, right? And then the system and the economy and very noisy here. So, are we to what degree are we walking that path as we're trying to build space for social economy? So at the same time, trying to build these new models, I think, is critical, and recognize, I think, that also those that are working on the policy and ecosystem side try to have a view that there is an emergence, right, of new ways of organizing that we need to figure out at the same time as even just trying to catch up to support social enterprises. And so, that requires both the demonstration effect. So recognize that this is an evolving space. It's not like we've got it all figured out, right? I think social enterprises have arisen organically, but they've arisen in a system that exists today, not, that's why it's a demonstrative form of activism. It's not a utility, it's not this utopian form of activism. We want Odin's dream, right, of that vast ocean. But we've got to build some little boats that to get there. So I think, just that we've got to keep our minds open, that we need to continue to evolve, and we won't, call success when we have social economy policies everywhere in the world and we have social finance tools, because we will have other problems. So it's about, this collective work also. I think the reality is, because policies and tools and very structural things that we build are still reductionist, right? And I think so much of this kind of relational work that Catherine's working on and we've worked on is so intangible, right? And we've got to recognize that actually the value of social capital, right, is so substantive, actually, in social change, that I don't know if we want to monetize it all. I don't know if we want to always measure it all, but recognize that we need to kind of invest in it at the same time. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, François. I think it's a perfect lead up to Arthur. Arthur, you have the floor. Yes.
Unless Georgia wants to make a comment.
I wanted to spontaneously react. I don't know how this will come out, because it's totally, yes, I'm getting just an impetus, but we've been dancing, or I have been dancing around this question of power that is coming up, and are we really creating solutions that can distribute and rebalance the relationships in the system? And when thinking of power, I like this model of, there's a teacher, Leticia Nieto, I have been studying with. She uses the onion. So she uses the framework of status, rank, and power. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but on the status level, we have basically our roles that are related to certain level of authority, resources, etc. On the rank is just what is socially valued and how we are valued in society as members of certain groups. And then our power, which is our core power, and it's what I think Odin was referring to, the yearning for the vast and endless sea that we have in all of us. We can tap it, but we're not always connected to it. So I guess the question is how to actually create those spaces where, when we bring all the different actors from whatever sector, at whatever status they are, and how they're, how they can, how we can create or foster the conditions in which they can tap into the authentic power. Then we have a very different level of dialogue. Then we don't just, speak across each other using the same words but meaning different things. Then a lot of these metrics And a lot of these tools and guides are just obsolete. And I can speak from experience, with these social impact bonds. We create the financial instruments. Okay, it's the tool. Everyone is so just stuck on the tool and the metrics, and it's hard. And I am continuously amazed with the many cases where we have funded a project, stakeholders have come together, worked for a year on defining together what is a success, what that action will be, and then say, we don't care about social impact bond, and we're going to fund it in the regular way and contract it in the regular way, but it doesn't matter because we're on the same page. We did the most important work, that conversion work that happens through the process. So it's very powerful. Otherwise, I mean, I'm just, it's more a question than a solution. It's how to actually have these spaces where people are tapped in. But unless we do that, I agree that then the tools, we will continue promoting the tools, but they would be co-opted, I think is the word you used, François, before. I see it in the impact investing space that actually satisfies the needs of institutional investors and asset owners. Many times their reputational and conscience needs, but it may not amount to really reforming a system.
Thank you so much, Georgia, for those thoughts. I really love those two words you put together, authentic power. I think that's a really powerful expression. I think, Arthur, this is right up your alley, the question that Georgia is bringing up. Do you want to share some perspective?
Sure. And let me take Odin's comment about carrot and stick and François' comment about power and George's reference to social impact bond, because as the inventor of it, I believe it's fundamentally flawed in terms of the current structure. If we need a stick, surely it is the fact that when we started off with the SDGs, we were looking at a figure of 2.5 trillion. We are now having to get somewhere between 8 to 14% of gross national product, if you believe McKinsey and IFC. So as a sector, we have spent $3.5 trillion since about 2015 to be 20% behind on the SDGs, for inequality to have gone through the window, and for the American intelligence agencies to say there is now a high probability that we're reaching 1.5 degrees by the year 2030. This is fairly substantive systemic failure by any criteria. So I suggest there's already the stick there if we really want to look our children in the face. Secondly, so a strategy of throwing silver bullets at solutions, which we all do as a sector, is not working, and it will not work. And we need to do what people are talking about on this call, which is look at this on a systems basis. And I'm sorry to say this, and I sound a bit like Will McAvoy when asked, what is America? Why is America the greatest country in the world? And it's what I'm probably going to sound like now. But let me say that I think it can be. If we create a systems approach, it totally changes the way you think about this process. But you've got to ask, what are you creating value for? The value is actually in the inefficiency of this continual re-replication of innovation in silos. The value is in terms of having no planning mechanism, although we know from research by the World Bank that if you actually apply a systems planning process, say down at the city level, you can take 45% of the costs out of the SDGs. The value is in the future cash flows as a function of systemic, collaborative, sequenced, not even a word we use in our sector, sequenced interventions. That's where the value is. If you put $1 into education in India, it generates $50 of future economic value. You put $1 into TB, it generates $100 potential of value. You look at the size of road safety, the biggest killer of 15 to 18 years, a $500 billion market, according to McKinsey. I could give you these, the methodologies and the processes to measure that have actually been created at a systems level. We talk about global action and people. Yes, but there are two key tools that we're ignoring. We ignore the implications of the data revolution that has taken across the rest of the sector. We talk about innovation in our silos, not how technology can actually radically change development itself. We need, so that's technology, I'll come back. The other one is legal. We can talk about till the cows come home, and I participate in far too many of these conversations, so excuse my tone of voice. We need to collaborate and da-da-da-da. You have to have the tools to collaborate. In the private sector, it is LLCs, LLP structures. That's how the sector works, where different players take different or indeed differing commercial benefits out of structure. We worked with the former head of the Exempt Unity, US philanthropic regulator, a UK charity commissioner, former US regulator, and we've actually passed into legislation, taking that legislation and putting a social dimension into it, which allows different players to take different or indeed differing economic social return, but with the social mission hardwired into that. And it also happens to be the same legal structure that is used in 100,000 structures in the City of London, which means you can create a financial vehicle where people have equity, and equity in both sense. Equity that is socially equitable, but equity that has different values. So each player can take a different or indeed differing economic return out of that. So there are four elements in my mind to the systems. One is asking the question how we apply the systems technology that has revolutionized every other sector of the world. That technology, we work with CERN, and with that, you can create a market-driven structure that is competitive, comparative, predictive, and holistic. So that when you make the social intervention, you know how it cuts across every single element. You know that if you pump enough data into that, it becomes predictive. This is exactly what is happening on the battlefields of Europe at the moment. This is exactly the way the other sectors of the economy work. We don't even use the word sequenced in our sector. So the first element is creating a data framework that's holistic, competitive, comparative, and predictive. Secondly, you need to create a legal framework that allows you to take existing innovation and plug it into scale. The fundamental thing that our sector ignores is that everything in finance is scale. If we continue talking about funding in silver bullet structures, we are stuck in blended value and VC. And you know what? The European Union governments have and foundations have about 0.5 in capital when you take out the costs. The challenge is 8 to 14% of GNP. Now you tell me where you're going to get a blended value or VC product that you leverage at 16 times minimum. We are on a path to failure. Let's be very clear. So you need a legal framework that allows you to plug existing innovation, plug and play it into an aggregated market, which is exactly what the bankers did themselves, to create scale, which then allows you to bring other financial products. You need a systemic way of injecting innovation into that mechanism that recognizes the value of three people: the value of the social entrepreneur, the value of the intermediary, and the value of the community as auditors, as market consumers of the goods they hold. And the final thing you need to have in here is a systems planning process that actually frames how you do that sequencing. So let me finish on a fairly negative thing. In the Black Sea today, you will find destroyers. Those destroyers are tracking 2,500 targets dynamically and allocating their weapon system as a function to that, integrating into an F-35 that then gives you a whole battlefield. We are seeing that played out between the Ukrainians and the Russians every single day. That's what happens in hard power. In soft power, we don't even use the word sequenced. We have ignored the implications of the data revolution that has impacted every other sector, and we ignore the need and requirement and necessity to redefine that relationship with the commercial sector. And you know what we're doing at the moment? A G7 GSG report, if you read that, has decided that the asset manager will be the principal. And if you read the side report, in a proposed self-regulatory structure, I'm sorry to be critical of a couple of people on the call here, but if you look at the European Union methodology for the measurement, what does it measure? It measures negative externalities. It does not measure positive externalities, nor does it manage, nor does it recognize the value of the sequenced social interventions collaboratively done between sector. And if we just measure the negative externalities, you end up in a mechanism where you provide subsidy to business to manage their risk, and you assume that society's objective is the same as business objective. You do not enter policies to tax the people that are creating their damage, and you do not create the subsidy of the social entrepreneurs and the other players to create opportunity. So
Thank
I
you,
apologize.
Arthur.
I apologize for going
No,
on.
that was really useful. Thank you very much. So at this point of the conversation, because we have about 9 minutes left, I would invite our speakers to maybe unmute themselves to share a reaction to what they've heard from Arthur, from Catherine, or anyone else in the panel, and also maybe let us know as they share that feedback, what is the commitment that they have taken to like distribute that power to the people close to the problem, the people can exchange and enable collective action, and perhaps leave us with a wish for the future at the distance that they want. So feel free to raise your hands if you want to jump in first. Otherwise, I'll call you to the floor. No volunteer? Okay, I'm going to turn back to you, François. Is there anything that you would like to react to and share with us?
I think I reacted to Catherine's. I'm not sure where to start with. Arthur, I mean, there are a lot of really, I think, important, and I think goes to the point of seeing ourselves not as a sector that talks to each other. I mean, there are these other massive dynamics in the world, and we need to figure out our collective voice and power to engage and tackle those things in the short term and long term. The other thing is, you know, this is, as Arthur was saying, this is the one sector that does not have this. I mean, there does not have power, right, in the ways that governments and business have power. We don't have political power. We don't have resource power. So what we do have is power, and it's the one thing that's actually changed things are social movements. So recognize that we are a movement, and kind of we need to own that a little bit, and that's getting beyond the individual enterprise view that we had. And I sound like I'm saying the same thing throughout the session, but maybe as part of closing. That is that recognition. So we need to build the structures to build enterprises to kind of get innovations into other larger institutions and systems, clearly, but recognize that we're not, because we've been in survival mode, right? So for so long, right? That we've been looking at it as an individual set of objectives. So I want to go on too long, but to say, I think I'm going to be on the side of optimism here. I think we are in a really exciting phase. I think Europe does have something. I mean, I don't know enough about Europe, so many of you may know I'm South African. So I think those of us who've been working in other countries have looked at what's happening in Europe, and so there's a role and a responsibility beyond, you know, that the world is also looking in, because we can point to examples and say, and then take national views on that from different places in the world. So I do think that's exciting and important for what we're building. And at the same time, I really like this panel and how there is also a awareness and consciousness and self-critique in what we're building as we do it. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you very much, François. Going to turn to Patrick and to invite you to share your reactions to today's and your commitment to enabling that work that we've been speaking about.
Thank you, Valeria. I think that it was really an inspiring, panel. Many ideas has been discussed, and maybe my main takeaway, from this panel is that no one can fix, the world alone, and that we have to really to work together, and we need increased collaboration between different stakeholders to make it happen, to develop, let's say, a kind of common vision, about what success might look like when we have to tackle specific challenges. So maybe if I had a call for action, is that we have indeed to continue to join forces, to make things happen. I think that we have to stay optimism, that there are still a lot to face. We have to stay positive, work hard, make it happen, and let's say that I read recently, an article, I don't remember which, from a French newspaper, and I like, the conclusion of this article, because, we are talking about, the future, we are talking about challenges, and I think that, the best way to predict, the future is to create it, and to create it, together. This may be, something positive that I want to say, for the end of this panel. We have the tools. Let's make it together, to achieve, a better future, for our children.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you so much. Georgia, would you like to share something with us? You can also react to what Arthur has said, if you wish.
Arthur said many important things. I guess I can put a hook to also what François addressed, this propulsion to manage the negative externalities. I hope that we don't stop there. It is the first step, but it is true that it is driven by a mindset in which we are just like managing risks, rather than being a little bit more open to the uncertainty of the future and to more actively create it from the present and really prepave. And this is something that I hope is coming to the policy world, to our big institutions, but I think it's where the work can start, at least for all of us individually. We have to just transform in this way first ourselves in order to bring it into our work area. My wish, I was thinking, working with philanthropy, and we are always fighting again about what is philanthropy, what legal form, what is the structure, what is the capital structure, what is the investment models. And actually philanthropy, to me, it's really a very simple definition. It's directing the energy and resources to the areas that will do the greatest good, period. Understanding that this greater good is the same for us, because, if we're really connected and to our authentic power, we know if we serve the whole, we serve ourselves. And so this is really a mindset that I wish that, we can cultivate, because it takes work to cultivate that in ourselves, but in everyone. And my wish is that, it becomes really a way of living, not a luxury, and not a luxury for wealthy people.
Thank you so much. Like mainstreaming the values of the social economy across ecosystems. Okay,
there is no time. I will.
If you want to just one very quick snappy point, because we're reaching the top of the hour, but if any of you has to leave, please do feel free to do so. Go ahead, Georgia.
I just wanted to tell you that also in response to one of the comments on how do we create these spaces, I have come across a method, the sociodrama method, of actually seeing ourselves in the roles and reshaping the roles individually and collectively. And it's very interesting because I come to it with inside the work of working with vulnerable groups and empowerment. It's not new. It's 100 years old, but it's an innovative practice now to bring it into social work. It's crazy. But my commitment is to really make it mainstream in state institutions and NGOs through the funding and the pilots. And I just want to share it as, this is for me, one hope of this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this commitment and all these points that you brought up. Peter, floor is yours.
So I'm aware of time. I mean, going back to Arthur's points, I think there's a lot in there. I think I couldn't agree more on the fallacy of kind of just funding enterprises as a solution to this. I mean, we've tried that, it doesn't work. The data revolution, I'm not going to pretend I understand the data revolution, but I know we should be more on top of it. I mean, it seems ridiculous that the rest of the world is, and it's going in that way. I have a challenge, I suppose, and it's from a point of no knowledge. I'm not pretending that. But when we start talking about the structures within the system, it kind of harks back to François' earlier point of, within the capitalist system and how we balance that. And I just saw a comment in the chat about offshore wealth and how that's distributed. And there are big questions in there, but I think what's needed is more challenging voices. I'm not saying Arthur's completely right in everything he says, I just don't know, but more voices that are prepared to challenge so that we get to a point and discuss those things. And then very quickly on the two things you asked around how am I going to distribute my own power? I suppose there's two things that strike mind. Number one is just be aware of my immense privilege to be able to sit around and think about these things. I mean, some people have to, you know, work for a living. No, but there is a kind of, this is an immense privilege to have these opportunities. And I'm in a unique position at a network where really I don't have much power, like hard power or whatever, but with no power comes no responsibility. So you kind of have that real role to play to actually ask awkward questions and really just challenge and hold people a little bit more to account. And lastly, you did ask what I'd wish. And counterintuitively, after this session, I kind of wish there was less networks in the world. So it would be kind of nice if we could all just be in one big network under a rainbow and kind of have these conversations and not have to do them 10 times or have our own language. So yeah, I kind of vote for my own extinction as a network, but we all merge together and have rainbows and lollipops. And with that, thank you very much for the panel.
Thank you so much. It's good to know that lollipops are your things. Okay, and then we're going to move to Odin last but not least. Odin, do you want to share something to react to what you've heard and maybe a commitment and a wish with us today?
Yeah, let's see. So for the last comment, I'd like to go back to this idea of power. It was mentioned a few times here. It's also in the question that you sent beforehand that we couldn't get to. And I think like the assumption that I heard in those discussions is that, you know, with more power, social entrepreneurs or social innovators could bring more change. And yeah, I mean, that's true, but only a little bit, right? Because we would still be fighting an uphill battle against the economic paradigm. And so, and by that, I mean, you know, what we already talked about, externalizing the costs to society and having no benefit of producing positive changes in society. So I think actually it would be better for social entrepreneurs and innovators to have less power. And like not by marginalizing them, but by doing what Arthur, I think, talked about, by creating incentives for big money to do the right thing. And if that happens, you know, the situation will have changed dramatically because, and this would include the 12% or whatever it might be that is of wealth that is just hiding somewhere. Because then everyone, like every company, every investor would be a social entrepreneur, like by our current definition. And so the people that we currently call social entrepreneurs would just have vanished. So like you can't have less power than having vanished. So I think we should think about this very differently. I don't think we should give this little minority fear that we are building more power. I think we should just eradicate it essentially by normalizing it to an extent that we are not special anymore.
Thank you so much, Odin. Thank you so much. So we've passed the top of the house. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I will thank once again all of our speakers for sharing their insight, their challenges, and being with us today. François, Georgia, Patrick, Peter, Odin, really thank you for being here. I'd like also to thank Arthur, Catherine, and Sue for offering their perspective, as well as to all of you for being here, and all of us in this room for renewing every day our commitment to trying to be part of that change and to come together to collectively build that green and equitable world that we all seek to live in. So I'm going to leave us on that, just reminding you that we will follow up and send the video of that event and integrate the insights from today in some paper that we share with all of you, and hopefully continue the conversation through the transition pathways in a couple of weeks from now. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. I hope you're living inspired. I hope that you're living feeling full of hope because you see so many things happening, and a bit challenged too, because that was the purpose of that conversation, because we truly believe that to grow, we need to challenge our mindsets, like Jordan mentioned several times, so that we can come with a real approach to transformative change. So thank you so much. Have a beautiful day, everybody, and to be continued.
Thank you. Bye-bye.